when they couldn't do it for you guys. In any case, it's really a pleasure and a privilege for all of us to have Brian Rossborough moderating this next session. And for those of you who may not have yet met Brian, be sure you do today. If I had to bring 5 people into a room that had the best ideas and the most innovative, creative thinking, he would probably be about number 2 on my list. I'm not going to tell you who number 1 is. My husband, of course. Just kidding. I have to keep him on his toes, you see. But Brian, actually, I call the inventor of citizen science. He was a finance person and he had this amazing idea way back when, I think in the 60s, that why couldn't scientists get volunteers on their research trips that would pay for their research. And he founded Earthwatch, which has since put millions of dollars into scientific research around the world, has taken thousands of citizen scientists and allowed them to learn about the scientific research process. And in doing so, has of course changed a lot of policies. His most recent endeavor was getting $55 million from the HSBC Bank, and they are training all of their CEOs and staff in how science works on climate change. So every single one of their employees goes out with one of Brian's teams on an Earthwatch expedition. So that's a really neat example of one person thinking something through and making a difference. So with that, welcome Brian.
Thank you very much. Is there any wonder why we all make she always makes you better than you feel. You know, you listen to your introductions, I imagine you think, gosh, I'd really like to meet that person. Thank you. What a privilege to be here, and what an exciting conference. I'd like to start really by thanking the sponsors, the National Education Association, ESA, certainly the National Science Foundation, and the agencies for agriculture and forestry. This is a really good thing you have done, and I hope they will invite us all back next year, because it is clear, as much as we have done for the environment, and as energetic as all of us have been, we are in some sense in a declining balance. And I think we all sense that, and we need a new environmentalism, and perhaps a new thinking about the relationship between the environment, economy, development, and growth. My take on this lineup is that yesterday we had 2 astronauts who've been places we would like to go and have never been, to the Arctic and to urban communities to reintroduce gardening. Stunning and breathtaking careers, and an encouragement, I think, all of us to be bold when we can be bold. The panel first was about the nets and bounds, I think, of environmental literacy. Is that enough? Can it be measured? Are we on the right course? Panel number 2 was largely the institutional response to the challenge of the organizers here and what's being done there. Panel number 3 was the promise of technology, a yeasty and exciting and emerging field. And so this is really the practitioners, those who are on the front line. How many educators in the audience, teachers and educators? God bless you. I've just come in from London. I have a little hacky cough. I succumb to that. But I spent 2.5 hours underground. Many of you have done this in the war rooms, where the British ran the Second World War. Largely spaces devoted to Winston Churchill, and if you've not taken the time to do it, please do. There were a lot of his speeches. But during the war, as you know, he went out to lift the spirits of the British people. And one of his speeches, which I can't recall by word, was that he was sent up to see the miners who were feeling very badly because they were not on the front lines. And he said, you know, someday they will ask who won this inheritance for us, and some will say we were submariners, others will say that we were in the light industry and still infantry, and still others will say we cleared the skies in the Battle of Britain. But you, with equal right and equal pride, shall say, we cut the coal. Now that's not a metaphor that we would use today because of our struggles with coal, But the point is that the educators, the teachers, the practitioners on the line, they are really doing the hard work of changing behavior and preparing the next generations for some very exciting problems. We have a great panel. We're covering various fields, and I will, right down to my right, introduce Danny Edelson, who is with the National Geographic Society, 3 years, says it's the best job he's ever had. But he started really as a computer scientist. He's a designer, an educational engineer, and so he's found a platform called the National Geographic, and he is responsible for geological or geographical literacy, which, as you know, has been a major and long enduring push by the Geographical Society. And then I have Keisha Gamer, is that right, Keisha Gamer? Close enough, thanks. From George Mason University. She's a specialist in virtual worlds, a colleague of Christine, who we heard from yesterday. She designs immersive learning systems. She's an authority on distance learning, and she's currently working with the Defense Department on the use of technologies to train, educate, and if you will, reinvigorate kids who are now being recruited into services all over the world. It's a very exciting assignment that she has. And next, we have somebody right on the battlefront. Susie Edelson is a take-no-prisoners teacher at an alternative school, the Yalpa Mountain High School in Colorado. And uniquely, she has 90 students and another 30 or 40 parents, pregnant mothers, who come to her courses. And she has found mileage in environmental education and discussions of sustainability, which are quite unique and quite exciting. But she was really started out in Buffalo, right? Moved west to Utah. Am I reading off the right?
Never looked back.
Never looked back. And then just outboard, Susie is Scott Richardson, who is with the Corporation for National and Community Service, which many of you remember is the extension of what was called Action in the 70s. Vista still survives. It's now in 3 different parts, 3 different communities that they work for. AmeriCorps, most of you know, has the largest budget, and they're trying to move towards 250,000 participants, huge. And that's the 17 to 25-year-old participant. They have Senior Corps, which some of us in the room might qualify for, and then the Learn and Serve America Corps, which is really a K-12, K through schools, all teachers and students doing very innovative things, and that's where Scott is focused at the moment. Not the international programs, which are separately incorporated in the Peace Corps. And Mari Peterson, on the very end, is with the College of Menominee Nation. And if you speak Menominee, you know that wild rice. She works with Native American learners of all ages, but came to this work really as a psychologist interested in education, traveled through Belize with her husband, came back and found that all of the children in her particular schools, and this is a college, did not have the basic skills. This came up several times yesterday. And so in order to transmit basic skills, she chose sustainability as a model and has created a course which she calls something Fundamentals of Critical Literacy. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's pretty good off on breakfast. So let me start right to my right with Danny Edelson. What's the most important thing you think we should take away from the conference and that you're working on at the National Geographic?
Well, as I was thinking about what I had to share today, I realized that there's one idea, one presentation that I've made in a lot of different forms and over almost 20 years, and I can date it because I picked up on a phrase from the 92 Clinton campaign where James Carville had printed in very large letters in the campaign headquarters it's the economy, stupid. The message that I think is most critical for all of us to remember is that my version of that is, it's the activity, stupid. And I always hesitate to say stupid, but it's actually, it's not, the reason I think that it's the economy, stupid, isn't saying that you're stupid and you need to be reminded to pay attention to the economy. It's that when you forget the most important thing, you're being stupid. And so, the reason I say it's the activity is that the most important determination of what people learn is what they're doing when they're learning. And we often forget that. So if you have students sitting and listening to a teacher in a classroom in order to take a test, what students are learning to do is sit in a classroom, listen to teachers, and take a test. If you have people going out into a forest and walking through the woods and listening to somebody explain something to them, what they're learning to do is walk through the woods and listen to somebody explain something to them. And it's very easy to forget that. So the lesson that I always say when I think about best practices, which is what we're going to be talking about today, is that we need to always be thinking about what is it that we're preparing our learners to do, and how can we make their learning experiences resemble that as much as possible. So,
thank you. Keisha, you prepare people at the Defense Department to do all kinds of things, and it's brilliantly done, and increasingly done through technology, enriched and refined. Your students, or those who work at the Defense Department, need often to go out in the woods. Would you agree with this, that more hands-on training makes an indelible learner, and can that actually be accomplished through virtual means?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to dovetail a little bit on what he said and add to that it takes a community. And that's something that's sort of reverberating throughout the Department of Defense at the National Defense University, where I'm working, and at the Workforce Development Center at George Mason University. And the reason those two entities have come together is because the government has understood that it really does take the whole nation. It is not simply just DOD, it's not simply the civilian agencies, but it's every citizen in the country to help protect our borders, help to protect our country, help to protect our citizens, and help to educate our citizens. So what we're looking at is how to reuse materials and resources across sectors, how we can best prepare citizens to serve publicly in the federal government and in the military, and how we can help the community colleges and universities to address the growing problem of media education in sharing those resources. And where does virtual worlds come into that? Well, it's another point of access. We can reach more people, we can take to them what they could not otherwise experience. We can control conditions and prepare them for eventualities that we otherwise would not be able to prepare them for. So, yeah.
So with the right money, you can do powerful things with technology. And as Chris showed us yesterday, we're beginning to work on that. Susie, you're in the classroom with 90 students, and I bet you don't have as much money as the Defense Department does. How do you inspire your students about the environment?
Well, I'd like to build on what Danny said about activities, but, currently in education versus environmental literacy, we're looking at, I think we need to start speaking the same language, because state standards are written in one language. Environmental literacy is written in a whole different set of linguistics, and so in my school right now we're focusing on, we're a turnaround school. So, when you look at those bubble graphs, we're the bottom left hand, growth and achievement, all those things. It's not a good place to be. You don't want to be there. But it forces you to reevaluate what you do and figure out if you're really doing what you say you're doing. And we're finding out we're not, and so to me, some of it is really looking at what we call enduring understandings, which is what's the point of what you're doing. So we do a backwards design model where we try to look at the big idea, and I feel like environmental literacy, that's where it needs to go next, is what's the point? And then you work your way backwards of, well, what are your essential questions? What do you really want people to know? Then you come up with your activities. Because if you're an activity-driven philosophy, then you are missing the philosophy. You know, you're not going to get there as fast as if you have a big idea and then work your way down. So, you know, that's where I kind of am now. It's like, I'm sort of a free-range educator. I used to I love projects. I've done all kinds of stuff from building straw bale classrooms to greenhouses and everything in between. But now I'm being forced, kind of, at first against my will, but now I'm into it. I'm into the challenge. I'm forced to figure out a map for what I do based on the new Colorado State standards, which actually interweave environmental literacy pretty darn well throughout the curriculum, throughout every subject area.
Well, Colorado is unique. I mean, I hear from a lot of people who say that standards, accreditation, rules keep teachers from being innovative, and that the select colleges that all the students want to go to don't necessarily have environmental literacy in their testing. How do you feel about that?
Yes. Yeah, you know, actually, I think when I started, we actually started this curriculum mapping project this week, and so at first I was horrified that I would have to teach. I mean, I'm the only science teacher in a school of 90 kids plus another 30 teen parents. And so to suddenly, 20-some years into my career, realize that I was supposed to teach every science concept was a little daunting. It still is, but because I didn't really like physics all that much. I didn't get into it. I was a wildlife biologist. But to really be forced to look at what you do and really go, well, I do environmental literacy. That's my highest goal in everything I do. I try to weave it in throughout the curriculum and go, well, where does Newton's law come in? Well, wind turbine. You have to start thinking big and really see the connections. If you're trying to get students to see the connections and you can't see them, then you're kind of missing the boat, is what I realized this week. So it's actually a really good process to go through, to have to sometimes, justify your existence and figure out that if you've been saying all along that environmental literacy is really that important concept, then you should be able to link it to everything you do. But it's hard. We'll see how it goes.
In an expanding, crowded, untidy world, service learning projects are wonderful ways to get people outdoors and to learn from others. Next time you're with Mr. Obama, do you think you could sell him on the idea of matching U.S. teachers with teachers in 220 countries for a multinational service corps?
We're golfing Sunday, so that sounds like about a 14 kind of comment for the president. I think that would be a great initiative to carry out. I think one of the essential pieces of demonstrating that service learning is a great environmental education strategy is the professional development that teachers get. And one of the things we've been working on through our grant making to particularly universities this last year is teacher professional development. What does really top quality teacher professional development look like? And we're delighted to have grant to the NEA Foundation to run a model of that in Columbus with their local affiliate, Ohio State, to figure out what kind of intensity and duration do you need to have for that teacher professional development. How do you really build a professional development community among teachers so that it's natural for them to get kids involved in authentic community problem solving around environmental issues. That's not 100% of the grants we make, but 2 of our strategic plan elements at our agency that we're just creating right now are environmental stewardship and education, especially how do we reach those young people who are not provided the civic engagement opportunities that better off kids are. We know from research in our own shop that 3/5 of all better off kids are going to have this very powerful question asked to them, which is, what will you do to help? We need your help. We need your talents. What are you going to do for us? And we know that only 2/5 of worse off kids have that question asked to them, have those opportunities in their schools. And so we are also pointing our grant making in the direction of the most disadvantaged schools, sometimes called turnaround schools, to try to make sure that that civic opportunity gap gets closed. Because there's a lot of gaps out there, but that's one that's often overlooked. My last comment is that I go to a lot of these kind of gatherings where people talk about what's the purpose of education, and they'll say, well, college readiness and career. And occasionally they'll fill out another C with civic engagement, or they'll mention it and it'll drop off. And that'll be the last you hear of it in an hour and a half talk. And I want to encourage folks to look at service learning, environmental education, and civic engagement all as one whole cloth that with the right kind of training and community support, we can really see whole school cultures turn around when we take that question to kids and say, what will you do to help our environment? We have a process that will invite you in to be a community problem solver. And that's what we're really trying to affect out in the schools in the U.S. And we'd love to blow that out across the globe.
Thanks. I'm going to come back to that. I greeted Marty for the first time this morning, thinking she was teaching at a Native American college and had rather a sophisticated first name, and must be Native American, but she assured me she wasn't. And right next to me, Keisha says, "Oh, I'm Chickasaw and Cherokee. Can I help?" My question really to both of you is, do the Native American community still enjoy a closer spiritual, cultural bond to the environment? And if so, how can we capitalize on that?
I think it depends. Can you hear me? For the students who have been raised on the reservation and are in families connected to their elders who share the knowledge and wisdom that has been passed on for generations, that's certainly true. I think there's, at least that's what I see, there's this connection to the environment and to stewardship and to cultural sustainability. We think of sustainability broader than simply, the natural environment. It's about cultural sustainability, environmental stewardship, and cultural relevance in terms of ceremonies and traditions and beliefs. But we have a lot of students who weren't raised on the reservation, who because of federal policies over the centuries were moved from the reservation, gone into cities, and are less connected with their culture. Often, some of those students, they'll come home, return to the reservation. But we certainly, with that said, we certainly try to connect, tap into indigenous knowledge and indigenous wisdom, and students study indigenous scholars, Native American scholars, and that seems to increase their engagement. With increased engagement is increased motivation to learn.
This is an area. Did you have a comment to make?
Yeah, I actually do. I wanted to add to that I think it also depends on the tribe and the location. One of the things that's happening with the nation of Tuckets and Pequots in the Rhode Island area is that there's an effort to try to bring, use some of the federal funds that they have to improve the economy of both nations and to also bring the culture to the rest of the community through architecture, through programs, through these businesses that they've established. And they're doing a really good job. Of course, the economy is affecting the businesses quite a bit, but what they're trying to do is to re-educate some of those people who've been displaced and moved out of the reservations into the cities, into the cultures. So there's quite a bit of that happening. There's even talk now about establishing a virtual world for reintroducing the indigenous cultures to the various First Nation tribes. So that's exciting. I know that some of that's already happening at the Smithsonian, not with the First Nation tribes, but with some Latin American cultures. So.
But,
Can I just add one note to this? A piece of troubling research that I've seen says that showed that Native students were scored best, and this may have been a Menominee or if Native Menominee said, scored better than their than comparable populations in their science understanding when they start school, and that by 8th grade they were scored significantly below the comparison population in the same kinds of areas. So they're and one of the possible explanations for that, other than different education, is resolving the conflict between the indigenous views of the world and the conflicting views of the world that they were becoming at school, not being able to resolve it. So I think that has really interesting implications for understanding of the environment and the way science is taught in our schools relative to the way science is understood in communities that have much deeper notions of sustainability than the dominant culture.
these are important points. The loss of biological diversity has its twin problem of the loss of cultural diversity. Earthwatch, among other things, has been very involved in the preservation of cultural heritage. We know about 6,000 languages on the planet, but about 3,000 will survive our generation. 728 of those are spoken in Papua New Guinea, and another 623 are spoken in Indonesia. So pockets of cultural diversity are very hard to find. And the loss of traditional wisdom and the cultural relationship to the environment is something that I think is a part of our work here, which is not only teach local, but teach through the cultural respect for the values that we all find in nature and the environment. These are really easy subjects. I have a question or two. You've all succeeded, but I'm really interested in some of your failures. Scott, or let me start with Dan. Dan is with the National Geographic Society, and with great trumpets and fanfare, 15 years ago, the Society decided to put geography back into the curriculum of every public school. How is that coming?
I think it's the right question to be asking. I think one of the challenges we have of learning in our culture is that you do learn from your mistakes and your failures, and we treat failures not as learning experiences, but we treat them as personal failures that affect your worldview. The challenge of bringing geography back into schools has been really substantial, and I never know when I talk in front of an audience, when I say the word geography, what you mean. I know what I mean, but I don't know what you hear. And I think that if you extend your views about environmental systems and environmental sustainability to include social systems and cultural sustainability, you would have the same idea of geography as we're trying to propagate. And it's not the geography of memorizing state capitals or coloring in maps. It's the geography, the real geography is understanding relationships between different places, either through human links or through ecological or geophysical links. And I say that because one of the biggest challenges that we have had historically in helping people to understand how important geographic literacy is that the vocabulary gets in the way. And that people, when you say you're concerned about geography, people think about their own geography education, which was trivial and frequently useless. So I think that a big failure that we've had, a lot of success that we've had is with teachers and changing teachers' conceptions and changing the practices of teachers in the classroom. But the biggest failure that we've had is at a policy and a systemic level, in that we've never been able to build the community support, the political will, the policy mechanisms to change the overall structure. And unless your interventions, unless your ideas extend to not just teachers and students or environmental educators and learners, but to a system that's going to foster and sustain and support the changes that you're trying to make, you're going to be banging your head against the wall.
And that would go for environmental literacy in public schools as well, right?
So exactly, I think it's the same issue.
Susie told me last night it was better to ask for forgiveness than permission, which made me think that she, like a fighter pilot, has no apparent fear of failure. Where have you tried and failed in your work, Susie?
Oh, never. I think, again, looking at student achievement or all those parameters, I don't necessarily agree that all those tests really show what they're supposed to show. But at the same time, I feel like, I'm pretty project focused, and I'm very big on, let's just go do it. Let's build a building. Let's go do this solar project. Let's do whatever. But, I'm starting to realize that some of the failures that my students, they can read and write, but they don't do it well and they don't enjoy it, and they're missing, I think in the past I've missed some of the golden opportunities to really get them writing and reading in environmental, within an environmental literacy context. That there's definitely more to doing these big projects than doing them. It's all the other sort of collateral activities. But at the same time, they've learned, I focus on other literacies. They know how to, teen moms who were involved in a solar project last year know how to read a wiring diagram. Read a wiring diagram and put something together as if someone's life depended on it. The girls can, after they get a project, so there's other literacies, but I think that might be one of the sort of overarching, I don't know if I call it a failure, I can't say that, but definitely a shortcoming is, trying to make sure you include more literacies than just environmental.
This is to any panelist. We seem to be missing the elephant in the room. Not a single speaker is focused on the economy and the impact of the economy on the choices that we have, the resources that we have available, and how we make our decisions. We're converting natural resources at a galloping pace around the planet to goods and services at what we would call unsustainable rates. Can we have a limited growth economy and sustainable development at the same time if we're feeding 1 million new people a year? In other words, is there an inconsistency between the governing systems of the economy and our aim here to have a sustainable, fair, equitable world? The experts are in the audience, so stand by.
Okay, I'll ask for forgiveness later, and I'll start talking. But that is the elephant in the corner. Last year, for our fourth quarter at school, the last few years, we've done a whole integrated curriculum between all the different teachers. And really, population, world hunger, all those things came up big. And, by the end, everyone was depressed. Because, feeding 9 billion people, sustainably developing with 9 billion people, that is, I don't know, I'm just sort of putting it out there. That, to me, that's the elephant in the corner with environmental literacy. I'm not sure, actually, how sustainable, the resources are out there, but they're not distributed well geographically. It's not just based on where populations are. It's, you get what you get wherever you live. That's what you have. You can't bring it from across the world. You see all the ads about how much sunshine there is in Africa for electricity. Well, yeah, but but then you need transmission, then you need, you know, so, I'm not sure.
It's complex, there's a confusion of priorities. Scott, you're on a continuing congressional resolution. All of your good ideas are treed because there's no resource. How do you feel about this question?
I think it is appropriate to call it something we danced around a little bit. The fact that we were that close to a total economic meltdown and still aren't completely clear of the crisis yet. And I think one thing that does is stoke fear among people. And one way that manifests itself among the young people that we work with is they start to look at education instrumentally. And so they say, how can I get the credential I need to get the job I need, rather than how can I learn and become a more well-rounded person, which I think before the catastrophe happened, we were seeing a positive trend line in that great question of all the college freshmen about, are you in this thing for the money, or are you in this thing for greater reasons? And a generational change, and we'd like to take a tiny bit of credit for that, among young people, that through being involved in community activities, service learning, AmeriCorps, that they become more public-minded and less materialistic. But I think that the big economic setback makes people focus again on the instrumental side of the war, which is a real difficult concern because the pressure then comes on the schools. Well, you're not getting the test scores you need, so we're not going to get the kids the credentials they need for the jobs they need. And then you end up doubling up on things we know don't work. So we got, you know, reading literacy problems, we'll give them twice, we'll give them a double period of lousy instruction. Or math that doesn't work very well. When we know from talking to dropouts and from doing research, if you start digging at the reasons that the kids leave school, often it's around the level of challenge in the school is not right. It's too easy or it's too hard. Or there's a lot of really, really smart kids who drop out because it's so boring and irrelevant. And so how do we shift schools to address those questions and not just blow them off because, well, isn't that how all teenagers are? They just don't want to do the work. Well, no, that's not the answer. Whoever asked yesterday about bringing the kids in, I delivered a huge amen when that question came up.
There are tensions in your work, and I'm wondering how you teach, where you find tensions. For instance, do you teach that the greater problem is population growth or the greater problem is consumption? Do you find when you're teaching it's more persuasive to talk about global change or our local needs? Are you a pessimist or an optimist about the future? Because pessimism, if you listen to it for a long time, becomes almost as agreeable as optimism to listen to. And so I'm wondering whether you find that pessimism motivates and excites greater than optimism about the future. How do you start with Keisha? Any one of those three questions.
I guess the thing that's on my mind today is, I'm not sure if you guys saw it in the Washington Post yesterday, but the Undersecretary of Defense, Dorothy Robin, just announced that with or without the support of Congress, DOD is moving forward with their initiative to reduce reliability on petroleum-based products. That's huge. And they now have an entire group that's focused specifically on that. And for me, that's very encouraging. Yeah, to me, that's very encouraging because it says that at the policy level, at least, people are understanding that there's a problem. And not only are they understanding that there's a problem, but they're willing to do what's necessary to deal with that problem and ask for forgiveness later. Because that's pretty much what's going to happen. So I'm optimistic. There are multiple barriers to and challenges that I think we all experience on different levels. That is one of the things that I think positive thing, and it's helping us overcome one particular challenge. But another challenge for us is the technology itself, dealing with issues of security. Of course, the rights of petroleum-based products is an issue of national security in itself, but using technology in secure spaces, being able to have access to the internet and various other software that we use across agencies is a challenge. But we have people all over the world, and we have to be able to communicate. And one of the things I like to talk about is what I call green communications, and that's where I see technology being able to help us to have that just-in-time collaborative.
Mari and Susie teach in the West, and I heard yesterday from somebody in the back of the room that the environment is a knee-jerk word out there, and that the ranchers and the farmers worry about Eastern liberals and their commitment to the environment. Do you find that that is a conflict in your work? With Susie first and then Mari.
I mean, I live where everyone else vacations, you know, in western Colorado, where we kind of live in the bubble in my valley. I was heard a quote last week that we have more solar installed in the town that I live in Cardell than Italy had in 1995. This is a town of 4,000 people. Even the ranchers are putting up solar. Everyone does solar around us because we have sun, and we do live in a bubble. There's a lot of solar power. And the ranchers are actually, there's been a lot of work to bring everybody together. You know, there's some pretty divisive issues, though. It's become more other types of recreation around us, and what really has divided the community more than how people use the land.
Mari, do you have a different idea?
Yes. I'm from Wisconsin, actually.
Sorry.
North Midwest.
That's in the middle.
There's a lot of people from Wisconsin here. Every other person I meet is from Wisconsin. So no, I don't have that knee-jerk reaction as much. But going back to the earlier question about global versus community, we focus the project on community, something that is very concrete and doable that the students can do at the end towards the end of the course. But we also think about it globally because students research, do library research, internet research, academic and professional literature on what's going on in the world, whether it be other tribes and other reservations or indigenous communities around the world, or even mainstream communities. And so we think about those ideas, talk about those ideas, study those ideas, and see if they're applicable in their community locally.
Yeah.
And they go out and do it. So I don't think it has to be either or. I think we can do both.
Thank you. Well, you're now awake, the audience, where all the experts really lie. Any questions for our panelists, either generally or to one? One in the back, the red shirt was up first.
Thank you.
Please stand and tell us who you are before I...
Hi, James Sarek from Lawrenceville, New Jersey. One of the things that all the panelists alluded to is the importance of kind of a place-based approach. And I want to be a little polemical here and say that I think that's maybe the best, maybe even the only way to propel environmental literacy forward. There are a lot of barriers to that, and I kind of wondered what sort of advice or what sort of thoughts you have about that. Place-based learning involves all the senses and all that connection stuff that I think are essential to making it real.
Good, and let's have one more question before we go to in the blue shirt, and then just in front of you, in the black ensemble.
Rich Innes with Nature Bridge. I was focusing on Danny's comment earlier about activities being the key. When I was young, I skipped school, which was a terrible thing. I was go down to a rally in New York on Wall Street, and I remember Abbie Hoffman speaking there, and he had a sort of an in-your-face sort of way of speaking, but he said, He said, don't tell me what you believe, tell me what you do with your life, and I'll tell you what you believe. And it was just kind of, I think it goes to the heart of this whole question of environmental literacy. It doesn't really matter what you believe, what do you do? And that goes to Danny's point about giving these kids activities, about the volunteer activities, the options that are available to them. And so the question is, for the panel, what are the real opportunities for these kids to take what they're learning in the classroom or through other informal learning opportunities and really apply that? And just one other comment, we work with the National Park Service very closely. One of the very underrepresented communities in there when you go to a national park is that minorities are very poorly represented within the personnel within the national park system. The current head of the national park system is very concerned about that. So that's one thing that we're trying to do is show kids, hey, there are great careers in here. There's a bunch of really fun, good stuff that you might think about doing with your life in here.
Thank you. Very good questions, both. And one more for the panel. So we have place-based learning, and we have opportunities for youth, especially minority youth. And the third question.
Darryl Alexander, American Federation of Teachers. You mentioned the economy. I'm going to mention the role of the federal government in leadership and helping to really leverage environmental literacy. I'm very concerned about the Congress that we're going to have come January 1st. So I remind all of you to vote. If you haven't voted already, please vote. I'm wondering if, as a lot of sort of the newly energized folks come in with an agenda of like eliminating discretionary funding, where we're going to find funds from the federal government to really keep up the good work in NOAA, USDA, all over the place. I'm very concerned about that, and we just really need some out-of-the-box thinking about where we're going to get some federal funding and leadership.
Oh, you've come to the right place for out of the box. I would translate that question is, how does the United States, robust and proud, deal with uncertainty and austerity, certainly ahead of us? So, who would like to take place-based learning? Good.
I actually want to take on the first two because I think that the first question answered the second. I think that place-based learning is the opportunity. And whether it's the place where you live and where your school is located, or whether it is a national park like where Nature Bridge is, those are the opportunities to engage students in activities where they are observing, analyzing problems, and developing solutions, and acquiring whatever knowledge and skills we want in the course of doing these kinds of place-based activities. I think place-based and local, as the person before said, is the path towards global understanding.
Eddie, that's good. We want to make sure that our answers are shorter than their questions. Does anybody want to tackle the thorny question of we're moving into a period of obvious austerity? So education is expensive. Should we count on the federal government to move this agenda of environmental literacy, or should we think differently about our funding sources? Isha, do you want to take that on? You're with the Defense Department.
Wow, that's a tough one. What I can say is that right now there is an initiative across the federal government called the Be Gov Initiative. And part of that is, the effort is to sort of look at how virtual work can transform the way that government operates. And what does that mean? Well, that means that if you live in the DC metro area, even if you don't, you probably got a live here. The traffic is insane. It takes me an hour and 15 minutes to get from Northern Virginia down to the National Defense University. And I do that every day. I'm one of thousands of people. That's a lot of people on the road with cars who don't need to be on the road. So this initiative is a multi-agency initiative. It's headed by the USDA.
Do they have money?
They have money. And what they're doing is they're looking at virtual worlds as an enabler for doing the work of government right now.
So they, I'm getting down, it's short, I have time for 2 more questions, but I think the response was that maybe technology can save, in some sense, carbon and save traffic and still put people together in very powerful equations. On this side of the room, we have 2 questions. There's one there in the back, and we have one over here. Yes, sir.
Tom Arsufi, Texas Tech University. I'm going to ask my question first, and it's sort of based on the dialogue that this panel has come up with. It seems that communication is one of the big issues that are adding to the complexity in addressing this environmental literacy. And I wonder if the problem, or a large part of the problem, isn't associated with higher education. And the idea is that higher education is structured as silos, in which we have different colleges and departments and not global communication. So we talk about multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary, and we've heard vocabulary being